everybody. I'm Krista Gibson, the host of Keeping It Real. And as you'll see today, my guest is Reverend Judith Laxer. Hello, Judith.
Hi, Krista.
And we're going to do something a little different. We are starting with this video, a series of 8 videos that are going to be about the Pagan Wheel of the Year. And Judith, I thought it would be great if you could explain a little bit about, well, first of all, who you are, so that, people who maybe haven't watched before will know, and what is the Pagan Wheel of the Year, and what is the first one we're talking about?
Okay, great. Well, thanks. I want to start with thanking you again for having me on your show.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I am a pagan high priestess, and what that means essentially is that I'm a member of clergy, and I don't think regular clergy would consider me one, but I certainly am, as an independent minister and priestess of the Divine Feminine. And I founded a ministry called Gaia's Temple, and this year in September we'll be 18 years old, so we've been going for quite a while. And it's a beautiful ministry of people who honor the earth as a sentient being, which is essentially the distinction, I would say, between most religions, most prominent world religions, and paganism, because the word pagan means of the earth. And so we are your quintessential tree huggers, We are those who love the earth and honor nature as an intelligent being and as a deity. So as one would worship God, we worship Goddess and God.
Right.
And the inclusion of the Divine Feminine to me, feels very, very balanced and beautiful. And I also think that the wonders of nature are just so extraordinary. And to me, that magical aspect of it is time.
Yes.
So it makes sense to me that my spiritual proclivities really find their niche there.
Right.
So I kind of discovered that as I was maturing when I was a younger woman. And once I found paganism, I just felt like I had found where my soul was home. And so I just continued on this path, which kind of leads to the Wheel of the Year, which we're going to be talking about in this series. So the Wheel of the Year is the cyclical model of the passing of time.
Okay.
And it is based on the seasons and our relationship to the sun as we go year by year. So we can look at that wheel as, I want to say a metaphor, but actually it is kind of about our orbit around the sun and how we experience the seasons as we go.
Right.
And so there are the solstices and the equinoxes, which most people know of, usually the big 4 corners, or of the corners of the circle, the cardinal points, actually. And most people know the solstices and the equinoxes, which are the longest days and longest nights, and the days that are of equal day and equal night as we go through the year, the solar year. The Wheel of the Year takes us through 8 different points, or they're called Sabbaths, that mark the seasonal changes as we go through time.
Okay.
And they're beautiful. And what I find is that honoring them and marking them in sacred space, the rituals that can go along with them, ways to observe these natural earth holy days, really deepens your experience, in every way. Your experience of living, your experience of your connection to nature, to the planet, to our reality.
Right.
It's very grounded.
Sounds exciting.
Grounded. How about that?
Yeah. Makes sense.
So one of the distinctions that I find that I just love and that also makes beautiful sense to me is, that on the pagan calendar, the seasons actually begin 6 weeks earlier than they are said to begin in secular society. So we'll come on to the spring equinox and everyone will say, yay, it's the beginning of spring. But in the pagan calendar, that actually begins 6 weeks prior at Imbolc, which is the first Sabbath that we're going to talk about today, which is February 1st or February 2nd. Okay. Now, it's kind of hard when it's really, still cold out there and in a lot of places where there's still snow to think, this is the beginning of spring. This doesn't make sense that it's the beginning of spring because the temperatures are
not spring-like.
And they're very erratic now with climate change, right? So we're seeing all kinds of things that aren't the normal usual that has been for thousands of years. So, but what it really connects to is the solar year. So it's really our relationship to the light, not necessarily the temperature. And if we notice, and we'll notice next week as we come on to February 1st and February 2nd, this year it actually falls on February 2nd, that it's a little lighter at 5 o'clock at night. We notice the difference in the light. And this is the beginning of spring. And so much what takes place on the earth is in relationship to light.
Right.
I just learned the other day that, chickens start to lay their eggs at the spring equinox, typically.
Oh,
and they do that because they need 12 hours of sunlight. They need to take in 12 hours of sunlight in their retinas to give their body the message that it's time to begin laying.
Oh, my goodness.
Isn't that fascinating? And then they stop laying at the autumn equinox when the days are shorter and the nights grow longer.
Wow.
So it's relationship to light as we go through the seasons.
Right.
That really is what we're marking here, not necessarily temperature.
Gotcha.
And on February 1st, the days are markedly longer than they were at Yule just 6 weeks ago.
Right, right. Yay.
Yay, and yay for that, right? So there are 8 Sabbats on the wheel of the year. And like I said, there are the solstices and the equinoxes. And then in between those two are a Sabbat. And so those are called the cross-quarter days. And the first one of the solar year is Imbolc, which is one that we're just coming on to now.
Okay.
So it's a Celtic name, Imbolc, and it's spelled, I've seen it spelled a million different ways.
Yeah.
I usually spell it I-M-B-O-L-C.
Right, that's how I saw it spelled.
Right. And it is the Sabbath that marks the beginning of spring, the season of spring. So while we can't necessarily see it, although here in the Northwest we can certainly see buds are forming,
right?
Sprouts are coming up out of the ground.
Yep.
We can actually see the signs of spring. It really talks about the awakening of life, and often that awakening that is not seen. So the sap is beginning to rise. The roots are beginning to awaken. The bulbs are starting to stir. We might not necessarily see evidence of that yet, but it's beginning to happen. And that's because it's responding to the growing light, which brings more heat and gives the message, oh, winter's over, time to wake up.
Right.
Time to start to grow and to sprout. So it's really quite beautiful. And it's called Imbolc. And in the Celtic language, Imbolc means ewe's milk, because the ewes were lambing now, and their milk was coming, and the lambs were being born. And so it refers to the production of milk, which is another manifestation of life happening again. New life coming in, and we have to sustain that life.
Right.
So that's kind of the origin of what the name is. And so there are many different ways that we can celebrate this Sabbath. But before I go into some specific things that I think we can do, the one thing that I wanted to say is that the Sabbath is often one in which it's a Sabbath of devotion.
Okay.
In which we devote ourselves to something, dedicate ourselves to something. Springtime is often a time of initiation because it is a time of newness and rebirth. And, the baby animals are being born and life is starting to resurrect from the ground. So it's a time when life begins to return. And then it's a time for our souls to dedicate ourselves, to creating this new life.
Right, right.
So it's so beautiful on a spiritual level
It
for
is.
that. It
is, yes.
And certainly don't have to wait till February 2nd to devote ourselves to something, But it is kind of a spiritually significant time to do that. So that is something that's good to keep in mind at this time. Like, as the light is growing, as the growing season is beginning, what am I going to dedicate or devote myself to on a spiritual level so that this energy of growth can help me and sustain me in that dedication?
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
It's really beautiful. So some people, some pagans will dedicate themselves to a specific deity, a different god or goddess, or just, it could be anything. It's kind of similar to having, like the New Year's resolution.
Yes.
This year I'm going to the gym, or whatever. But it's less about, I mean, it could be about anything. You could devote yourself to anything. But I do think Imbolc is specific toward your spiritual growth.
Right.
What are you going to devote yourself to spiritually so that you can feel more spiritually aligned and connected?
Like perhaps a spiritual practice, you know, a person's meditation or using a particular technique like Tarot or I Ching or something. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can devote yourself to.
Exactly. And those can be those kind of practices. They can also be more internal things like, you know, I've noticed I have a little trouble forgiving.
Right.
I'm going to dedicate myself to the practice and the art and discovery and the consciousness about how to be a more forgiving person.
Right. Yeah.
That's a great thing to devote yourself to.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any wrong thing to devote yourself to unless you harm somebody.
But it's a good examples for people to think about. Well, what would work for them? You know.
Yes, exactly. And rather than, you know, I'm going to go to the gym because I need to get skinny because of this and that and the other, perhaps the dedication would be, what is the best self-care I can take of my body? Because my body is the temple of my spirit.
Right.
And if I don't take care of it, game over. And would I treat anybody's temple poorly? No. Right. No, I wouldn't. You know, so how can I take better care of my own? Yes. So that kind of devotion is something that is particular to the Imbolc Sabbath, which is really just so beautiful. And I think also, you know, when we get to the spring equinox and flowers are beginning to bloom, it's you know, it's such a welcome sight. Of course, there's a riotous to it now, you know, because we're starting to see color on the landscape again, and you know, but Imbolc is more of that quiet sort of. And so there's such a beauty to that, I find. You know, I think it speaks to all my past lives as a monk, as a nun, as a hermit, as a contestant, you know, sequestered away from the rest of the world. So anyway, so that's kind of like the groundwork, really, of what Imbolc is about. The light is lengthening, the days are noticeably longer, and it's a time of dedication. So Imbolc is also particular to the Irish goddess Bridget, who is just magnificent. And she's a triple goddess, Bridget is, and she is known for her attributes of healing and inspiration and smithcraft. And her gifts are the flame, the fire of passion, and the forge, right? That's the smithcraft part. And also her healing waters from her well. So we have several different things that we can work with in creating ritual here based on this beautiful goddess Bridget. And so you can read up about her. You can learn a little bit more about her. And one thing that I love about Bridget is, you know, the Catholic Church finally had to make her a saint. The pagan people would not give up their worship of Bridget. No matter what, they were still worshiping her. Even though they had to go to church, they were still, you know,
not giving up my Bridget.
I'm not giving her up. So they finally made her a saint and included her in Catholicism. But she has ancient worship, and that worship has gone on, you know, nonstop for just centuries and centuries. People will visit her wells in Ireland. You know, they'll bless themselves with the holy water. That is a beautiful ritual that you can do. And even if you don't have water specifically from Bridget's well, you can still bless water and do a cleansing on it. And that's kind of the beginning of spring cleaning anyway. So you can use waters of life. And in our rituals, we'll do a very simple thing where we take like a big old punch bowl and we fill it with water, warm water. And I have some drops of, you know, waters of the world that have been collected from all over the planet, and also a fair amount of places I've been along the way. And we put a few drops in it, and that makes it holy water. We'll throw some rose petals in it or some lavender, so it smells really beautiful. And then we'll wash one another's hands in that water. And it is such a simple ritual gesture, but it is so beautiful. There's something about doing that. And even if you're just doing a solo ritual, there's something about washing your hands, specifically in holy water for spiritual intention, that is quite magical. So it's a great way to do some cleansing, which is appropriate at the beginning of spring also. And then there's the fire element. Bridget was said to be the one who brought fire forth to humans. And we can look at fire in a million and one different ways, but we can certainly look at it spiritually as the light that we follow. We can look at it as the growing light of the season, and we can look at it also as our passion and what makes us feel, inflamed and inspired. And Bridget is also a goddess of inspiration. So you can call on Bridget when you need to be inspired, when you're trying to write those words and you can't find them. You have an idea, but it can't seem to get out and manifest sometimes. Bridget, inspire me. And so the blessing of candles, the lighting of candles, those are also beautiful rituals that you can do at this time of year to mark the Sabbath of Imbolc.
Nice. Those all sound wonderful, very spiritual and very grounding and useful. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be complicated.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that is specific about devotion also. I think we think it has to be complicated.
Right.
It should be powerful or meaningful. And I'm finding, and maybe it's just as I get older, and so less is more, which is what happens as I get older.
Right.
But I'm finding that the simpler the rituals are, in a way, the more impact they have. It doesn't have to be all the bells and whistles. It can be the simple act of washing my hands in sacred space that makes me feel ready for the spring.
Right. Now, don't you, because I know we've talked about it before, but you have a book. And
I do.
In your book, don't you have something about this Wheel of the Year? I mean, that's what it's based on. So is there something from your book that you can share also?
Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, that's right. My book. I wrote a book called Along the Wheel of Time, Sacred Stories for Nature Lovers. And it is a collection of 8 short stories that accompany the points on the Wheel of the Year. So you can read the whole book just to kind of get a general understanding about that. But you can also go to the specific Sabbath story that is closest to where you are on the Wheel of the Year and read it to help you deepen your connection specifically to the Sabbath. And there are fictional stories that I've written. So there are 8 different stories with different characters in them. And the Imbolc story is loosely based on a healing ritual that took place in my private circle many, many years ago. And I chose to use that because of Bridget's healing waters. So, it was a cleansing ritual and a planting ritual. So there was a great cleansing that took place, and then we planted bulbs to represent the resurrection of health. And it's a beautiful story. Well, of course, I'm going to think it's a beautiful story. I wrote it.
Right, of course.
But it's a good way to kind of look at how you can devote yourself to your healing specifically, as one example.
Right.
What it's like to be doing a devotional ritual.
So are you doing something locally for people who are here in the Seattle area? Are you doing something?
Well, yes, we are. Gaia's Temple hosts all 8 Sabbaths that are open to the public each year. And, the biggest ones are usually Samhain, which is Halloween, and Yule. Right. For pagans, those are the Christmas and Easter. The Christians go to church, and then the rest of the year you never see them. So we have huge ones. But a lot of people come for Imbolc also, and that is going to be on Friday night. I'm looking at my calendar. Friday night, February 2nd. It's going to be here in Seattle, and it's at 7 p.m., and you can go to our website, which is www.gaiastemple.org, and that's spelled GAIAS temple.org. And go to the event page, and there's specific information about location and time and what you'll need to know about it. But yeah, we have a beautiful ritual planned. And, the other thing that I love about these rituals, too, is that things that I've talked about here for Imbolc, those are kind of the bones of what it's about. It's the returning spring. It's the growing light. It's the time to dedicate and devote yourself. Get in touch with what you are impassioned about and let that fire and that inspiration carry you into the year. What I love about that is every year there's something else different going on. Like in the world around us, look what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
But we can use those themes about what we are impassioned about, what needs healing, what kind of magic
Right.
is necessary in our culture right now,
Right.
how we can take really good care and better care of the earth, because when all is said and done,
Yep.
what's going on with climate change that ultimately is going to do us in.
If we don't take care of Mama, Mama can't take care of us.
Ooh, that is very true.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful too, because it's kind of, you know, you can use your own creativity.
Mm-hmm.
As
Yeah.
you understand, like, oh, this is the idea, this is
Right.
the cost of what the energy is for this Sabbath.
Yeah.
What's happening for me in my life, or what's going on around me is,
Yeah,
so how can we apply those?
Exactly.
And then it becomes something a little new and different each time, which
Right.
is just so, you know.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has just been really enlightening, you know, and I think people can take this information and use it in their own lives and create their own ritual, and go to yours if they can, and if not, because we have viewers from all over, then create your own. There's no rules about it. You know, do what works for you.
Right. Yeah.
So thank you so much, and I will talk to you next time, which will be when we'll be talking about
Spring equinox.
That's what I thought. So
yeah.
That's what we'll be talking about next. So in the meantime, enjoy the holiday of Imbolc, and we'll see you then.
So much, Krista.
Thank you.